Welcome to Spill the Tea. Spill the Tea is an initiative by Scratching Collective. Scratching is a collective created by young artists for young artists to develop work at the scratchiest stages. Spill the Tea is a series of dialogue sessions looking at a range of topics that deal with arts and society. Each episode of Spill the Tea will feature a panelist of people involved in the industry. This episode will be hosted by guest host Jonny Hill.
All right, we are starting this, baby. We are getting this rocking and rolling. My name is Jonny Peyton-Hill, and this is Spill the Tea. I would like to thank you guys for joining me today. I'm super excited. So Jonny Peyton-Hill, I am a queer writer and performer. I'm a student at Central on the acting CDT course. And yes, I'm super excited to be able to talk to you guys about queer performance today. So yes, to introduce our guests, we have Yulia Vagina, Finnish drag queen, who we are very excited to have here with us today. We have Kyran Thrax, a student at East 15 and drag performer and actor. We have Rory Thomas-Howes, writer, producer, and actor, which is fabulous. Triple threat, baby. So I would love to know a little bit more about what you all are up to, like in your practice, and a little bit about like your journey, about how you got to your point in this career. So I would love to come to Yulia first. So yeah, tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, I do drag as Yulia Vagina, and I also DJ in a drag collective called House of Hour. We were formed in 2016, and our first appearance was at Helsinki Pride that year, and we just we looked like a hot mess, but we just thought we were the hottest bitches in town. And after that, we kind of thought, we want to start performing, and we contacted a bunch of drag clubs in Helsinki and just asked if we could perform, and none of them replied to our emails and DMs, obviously because no one knew who we were. So we just decided that, well, we're just going to start our own club then. And in 2017, we hosted our first happy hour, which is like a play on happy hour and our name Hour. And from the start, we just decided that it was important for us to offer the stage for other up and coming drag artists because of our experience with those different clubs. And I think most of our happy hour clubs have had like at least one performer who's never performed before. And then besides happy hour, we've been kind of performing in drag and also DJing with our club concept Discoteca Hour in clubs in Helsinki, just around making a name for ourselves. And then that kind of culminated in us performing at Flow Festival in 2019, which is like literally the biggest festivals in Finland. And I literally ran off to change after our own show to see The Cure, which is insane. But yeah, we've just done some online stuff since last year because obviously the pandemic hit. And during that bit last summer, when like Finland was pretty much open, we managed to have a Discoteca Hour club with Lady Gaga's new album coming out, and we just had this like official album party for Chromatica in collaboration with Universal, and we got a bunch of merch from them and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how things are going right now. It's kind of quiet right now. But yeah.
That's awesome. And I can tell that you're a big Lady Gaga fan because I can
yes,
in the background.
she's like the number one inspiration for what like literally everything we do as House of Hour. We even had a happy hour club, I think it was 2018, that was called like basically based on art rave, and like all the performers had like Lady Gaga themed performances and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. You have connections to London as well, don't you? You have are you in London at the moment, or
I am in London right now. I study in Goldsmiths. I do BA Arts Management because I produce all those drag shows in Finland. So that's kind of my background. I also do producing, and that's why I went to BA Arts Management, so I could focus on more of the producing side of things.
That's awesome. Sweet. So you do, like is Happy Hour based in Finland, or is that based
Yeah,
in England?
that's
Awesome.
everything's in Finland, like drag wise. I'm just here doing my little studies, but obviously I would love to branch out to London, but I just haven't really had the time, and then pandemic hit and everything.
Mm.
But yeah,
But I suppose that like especially doing everything online, that makes it easier if you're based in London to be able to,
exactly.
doing drag and events organization,
Yeah,
like doing stuff over in Finland.
it's actually quite funny because I moved here in 2019, and I was doing online performances before everyone else did, because I was like,
Okay.
we had our little club running in Helsinki, and obviously I was here, so I couldn't physically be there, so I just like did technically a performance beforehand and filmed it and everything, and they just showed it at the club in Helsinki. So I was kind of doing that before everyone, like, and then the pandemic hit and everyone else started doing online like pre-filmed performances. And I was like, yeah,
We've got a pioneer here, ladies and
I
gentlemen.
sure.
That's awesome. Sweet.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Julia. I'd love to hear from Kyran about like your journey to this point as well.
Yes. So it's been a weird journey, actually. So when I was like, I always knew I wanted to be a performer, so I tried to get into drama school like every other person who wants to be a performer does. And got into East 15. I was focused very much on acting, and then I started getting involved with makeup artistry. God, started getting involved with makeup artistry, and yeah, and then I was doing it like side by side. So like I'd go to drama school and I'd have my full day, and then I'd come home and I'd do like a makeup look, and then it kind of like hit me, and I was like, wait, why don't I like throw them together and be a drag artist? Because I'm literally a performer and I literally like makeup. So I just put them together and became a drag artist and started competing in things pre-pandemic and making a name for myself in East London.
What sort of things were you competing in?
So I competed in a competition called the Gold Rush, which was insane. Because I didn't really know anything about the London drag scene. Like I just was like, I'll just throw my name into something. And then they put me in for a heat to get into the competition, and I got through. And then it was like the most intense thing because I was mid doing expressionism at drama school. So I was like, my body was destroyed, and then I'd have to like get into drag like in the bathroom at East 15 and then like run to East London and like do a number that I've somehow managed to like put together in the past week. And it was just like, it was really great because it kind of like pushes you into the point where you're working a little bit too hard, but it shows you how much you can do. So it's kind of healthy but unhealthy, you know. And yeah, and then the pandemic hit, everything became digital drag, it became digital drama school. I was just doing digital everything, and it was horrific but also kind of great that everyone was like coming together. And now I'm finally back in rehearsals doing the lovely debut, which is a thing that we do on the CT course where we write, direct, and act in our own shows. And we do 6 to 8 shows usually. And that's coming out in the next couple of weeks.
That's so exciting. That's awesome. I'd love to know like how you like what started you off in makeup. Like you said, you already had like a an enthusiasm and an experience in that. Like what was kind of like your beginnings in that?
I actually don't really know. I grew up with just my mum and my sister, so I think maybe I always had some kind of intrigue there because it was just something that those two were doing and I wasn't, and I was like, what is this? And then it just became like kind of an expression thing. I started playing around with it in like 2017, 2016, but like was just kind of rubbing weird products onto my face, and it wasn't like it didn't look great, but like I was like, whoa, expression. And then I started getting more serious about it in my first year here, and was just like making my looks like more extreme and more avant-garde and like taking more pride in my work online and stuff. And then just threw them together and was like, why don't we just perform in the makeup. How exciting is that?
Mesh the two worlds together.
Yeah, it changed my life, honestly.
That's awesome. And yes, what was I going to say? Yes, you are an actor and drag queen. Like, how do you feel like those sort of things like marry together? Like, what skills do you kind of transfer from one to the next?
Okay, so actually a lot is really crazy. So I focus a lot on because of the course that I do is a lot on devising and expressionism and clowning and all of that good stuff. So it's kind of stuff that's really easily transferable. So my movement style and the devising of my performances physically with my body, I find like kind of easy to go to and devise alongside the music and the lyrics. And then the acting side of it, I feel like I can use my face well enough, you know, as an actor. And clowning, when it's not like a lip sync performance and it's just like hosting or comedy and stuff, I go to like clowning and commedia because it's just so easily accessible and it works. It just works because drag is so like hyper theatrical most of the time, and taking this like weird universe where you've just been like taught to go to the big extremes, it's really useful actually. But then there's obviously like the subtle like naturalistic acting side, which I don't really use much in my drag, but it's nice to have that understanding, and they do just work perfectly hand in hand, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure it could be argued that drag is like just an extension of theatre, which is
yeah, of course.
And I, like you mentioned, your own contemporary theatre. So I believe we have another graduate of the course here, Rory. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah, you are. Yeah, that's I was on the same course as Kyran. I graduated in 2019, so I managed to just eke out before the pandemic hit, which was really lucky. And obviously, Phil, my heart goes out to everybody who's on the course, including you, Kyran. But you're doing all right, so you're doing pretty good stuff. Yeah.
Have you guys met before? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in Kyran's audition to get into East 15. So I was sitting there, and after he left, the course leader just kind of turned to me and was like, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah. Like, Rory, if you'd love to tell us like how you got into writing, like your starting, like where you started in terms of like performance.
So yeah, I auditioned for drama school for years. I was auditioning for 5 years, and I was always going for BA acting. And I got into a couple of places, and I decided at the end of the day, I went and looked at them and was like, not for me, I don't want to go. So I didn't go then. And I just I was just getting knocked back a lot, and I was like, I don't really know. And I kind of decided eventually, I was like, there's going to be a point where I just stop and I have to do something else. But I was always a writer, and I was always creating stuff, and I always liked devising and making stuff up on the spot and improvising. And I did a lot of that with National Youth Theatre. And so rep in NYT, even though I pretty much did nothing other than the summer course, but still I'm like, but then, yeah. And then my friend got onto the contemporary theatre course at East 15 and said, this is great. This is, at the end of this course, you get to write plays and direct them and do all this. And I was like, well, that sounds exactly like what I want to do, because I never like doing just one thing. I get really bored of acting after a while, and then I just want to go and write something for 100 years, and then I want to come back and do acting. So I never want to sit in one place. So I got onto that course, which was great. And then during that, there was lots of opportunities for writing and creating, and I ended up writing my first play, which was called A Partnership. And it was an LGBTQ plus two-hander, and it was about internalized homophobia. It was all played out in real time in one location. So the challenge for me was to make this one conversation basically just interesting for an hour, which I mean, hopefully I did. And so yeah, that went well. Wrote that, took that up to Fringe, had a lovely Fringe. A lot of people came and saw it, and we had a couple of sellouts and some great reviews and some awards, which was lovely. And then and then now we're sort of in the process of putting it onto like a small scale UK tour, all stuff that we were going to be doing last year, and then obviously pandemic, and so we couldn't do it. So we've had a little R&D and rejig of the play, and yeah, so that's hopefully going to be going out soon. But yeah, I mean, it really is just in terms of being a writer, it's kind of like I just had this play, and then I was like, I don't know how to do anything with it. And then I was like, well, you go to Fringe, you've got to play, you go to Fringe. And so we went to Fringe, and we just spent 6 months emailing and chatting to everybody we possibly could to try and come and see it. So I'm very much just like went in with no clue of what I was doing, and just tried to figure out a way.
But hey, a partnership debut to some wonderful reviews at the Fringe, so I've heard. So, you know, it all worked out.
Yeah, it did well. It was lovely. I mean, it was really nice because obviously when you're at the Fringe, you just want to keep getting people into your play. So luckily, the first reviewer we had in gave it 5 stars, and actually became quite a good friend of ours afterwards, which was lovely. So he's just going around every poster just like shoving 5 stars on it, like, please come see it. Look, this person says it's good, so you should like it too. Come and see it.
Awesome. And I know that you do like all your writing performance projects underneath the banner of Paper Mug.
Mm-hmm.
So how like where did you meet people in Paper Mug? Like, how did that come about?
So yeah, so Paper Mug is my theatre company. I run it with 2 other people, Josh Tucker and Sebastian Gardner, and we all met on the same course at East 15. And we were kind of like, we had similar plays, and we were really good friends, and we had similar ideals of what we wanted to get out of this theatre company. So we said, all right, let's just put this. We had 2 plays that we took to Fringe. Let's put them under the banner of Paper Mug, and then we have kind of brand awareness, so people go see one play. After that, we can give them a flyer for the other play. It's just exactly, it's all business acumen stuff that, you know, I say as if I have any idea what business is. Yes, so sorry, go on.
Oh, that's all right. I was just going to ask, like, do you consider like Paper Mug to be like an LGBTQ plus company, or is it wider than that, broader?
So it honestly, it's not really specifically LGBTQ plus. The thing that makes it LGBTQ plus on our side is that everything I write has to include a queer character somewhere in the narrative, and almost everything I write includes a queer character as the center of the narrative, and it's about queer issues. And so our company sort of design is that we look into sort of unseen issues in society. And then also we've got like lots of other things, and like we have a horror zombie comedy that we've made, and we've also got an immersive like medieval style Dungeons and Dragons style game that we're putting on. So we have like this like base level of what we do, but we also branch out into lots of other like crazy stuff, just stuff that we enjoy doing. But I love writing about queer stuff. I love sort of like pulling threads and having a look at what we need to fix and work on. And so that's my contribution to the theatre company, is that's where all the queerness comes into it.
Awesome, thank you. I'm like I said, I'm obsessed with these ideas, and I really hope I can see them at some point. I love the idea of like this, I don't know, like choose your own destiny sort of show, like the Dungeons and Dragons style. That sounds awesome.
As soon as pandemic's over and I've got 100 grand, I'll put it on and you can be the first one in.
Y'all ain't ready for this. Come on to our next question. Yulia, you mentioned this earlier on, which, you know, segues beautifully into the question. What projects have you seen that have shaped the work that you now create? And I know you mentioned Lady Gaga, and I would love to know like all about like how Lady Gaga shaped your work, or even any other like influences which you draw from for your
the thing is I'm in House of Our with 3 other people, and 2 of those people are my like longtime friends who I've met on a Facebook group called Lady Gaga Fans Finland in like 2009 or something, 2010. We met on a Facebook group, and then we were all living in like different cities around Finland, and that's how we like initially met, and like we were talking like every day, and then just became friends. So Gaga is like the base of everything, the foundation.
Binds everything together.
Yes. Yeah, so she's always been like, she's like the strengthening bond of our group, basically. Like yeah, everything, she's been like crazy Gaga fan since like day one. But
Like the Fame
yeah. Huh?
Since like the Fame era, 2009.
Yeah. All of us have been like crazy fans since then. Obviously we didn't meet until like 2010, but still. Yeah, she's like the base of inspiration for everything. But then I do think I think for our drag collective, our biggest inspiration, at least for me, has to be Drag Me to Hell, which is a Finnish drag collective. They are, I would say, the founding fathers of Finnish drag. Lainey Crackhouse and Lila Vanilla, they are I think the like, yeah, founding fathers is a good time, but they basically like started
underground, because I know that you'd consider like House of Hour to be like an underground sort of collective.
Yeah. So they're like the like leaders of like underground Finnish drag, because there's like two different categories of Finnish drag. This is the underground part, which is where kind of we land, and then there's the traditional like impersonator type of people, and like very much like a group that I don't want to be associated with in any way, because they also
more like the traditional drag side, possibly more like the more commercial. Is that the right term to use, perhaps?
Commercial, yes, definitely, because they're very much like towards like white people who go to like Christmas parties, and then they perform to those kind of people, and we're doing queer drag for queer people. I feel like that's the main like distinction between the two.
I get you.
So yeah, Drag Me to Hell, they are the first big like underground drag collective, and that was actually my first drag show that I ever went to. They at the time brought the first like girls from Drag Race to Finland, and they've been just like doing everything, and they're like my biggest inspiration, because they're the ones that are like holding the family together. Because I think the underground drag scene in Finland is like this big family, and they're like the parents. But yeah, and I also had the privilege to perform at a Drag Me to Hell event with Cheddar Gorgeous. They brought Cheddar Gorgeous from Manchester out to Finland, and I got to perform there. And I also actually got to perform at another event where they had Virgin Extravaganza from London. And yeah, so they're like the biggest inspiration for, I think, like drag practice wise and like producing side things.
Oh, what do you mean on terms of like producing side? Sorry.
Just like the fact that they just like built this empire of underground drag in Finland, and managed to be the like ones who like were the first ones to bring out like Drag Race girls and have like make underground drag like well known in Finland.
Got you.
That's what I mean.
So they're kind of like the model, which everyone bases on. Are they? Correct me if I'm wrong. Are they sort of like the equivalent to what like club kids would be in the UK?
Kind of, but then there's also another like clearly like a club kid scene in Helsinki as well, which is kind of different from what we do in the underground drag scene, but it's kind of also somewhat ties together as well.
Awesome. And yeah,
and I also just, the club kid scene is obvious, they're also another huge inspiration to me. I just love their like extravagant looks and like the way that they approach not necessarily drag, because they're not like drag artists per se, but just like their view of being these like extravagant creatures that just party and attend parties and are like fabulous. So that's why,
like, fabulous, entities.
Yeah, exactly. And just like this thing, like they just appear to a party, and then that's the thing, and then you don't have to
They
do
won't
anything
not.
else.
They
And
have-
I want to do that. I want to be just like the party is me arriving there, and that's
I
it.
love that. Like she's here and she's ready.
Yeah, exactly.
The queer.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you. And yes, Kyran, like I'm sure you can probably cite some very sort of similar inspirations as Yulia for like, you know, the work you create in your drag.
Yes. So firstly, yes, Lady Gaga. It obviously inspires everything of every queer artist pretty much ever. Like, it's something that like she has just, I don't know, she's been such a trailblazer and like is probably the best drag queen in the entire world. So yeah, that. Me and my drag family, obviously we inspire each other all the time. I take a lot of inspiration from them. I take a lot of inspiration from the whole of the East London scene, from my course mates, from anybody that's creating new work and like trying to break the mold. It's just, I don't know, it's such a broad question because I feel like I really do. Like if you had asked me a couple of years ago, I'd been like, I inspire myself and that's about it. But now it's like I just really do find inspiration in literally everything. I could stare at a blank wall for long enough and it would inspire me. You know what I mean?
I get you. But to perhaps narrow the question down in terms of like, because you have your drag side and your acting side. Like, I don't know, have you seen any like queer theatre projects which have been like, that's the kind of stuff I want to make, that inspires me?
So theatre, I don't know what I saw. I obviously saw The Inheritance when it was on, and I thought that was just absolutely incredible. Like, and I was so pleasantly surprised because I remember like buying tickets for it with my partner, and we were like, 7 hours, okay, this is gonna be bad, and it just was just incredible. And that theatre wise, like that is something that I would love to do. But also I do, over the years, like I found more enjoyment in just doing like the really crazy like clowning cabaret kind of stuff, which is like essentially me doing drag but just without wearing drag. So you know, but yeah. And TV, It's a Sin recently came out, and I'm just like, if I was going to do anything TV and film, that is kind of like I would be thrown into that immediately. I just thought it was so incredible and like stories that needed to be told.
It's so interesting as well because like I feel that there's a lot of focus on like the US epidemic of AIDS, and there's barely any like stories told from the UK's perspective. Like I know there was like they touched upon it in the movie Pride, they touched upon it in It's a Sin, but it's just very much like I think when you see so much representation of it from a US side, you kind of think, oh, that's all it was. That was where it was, but no, it was worldwide. Like there is experiences of it all across the world, and I think that's why It's a Sin is so important.
It's a Sin was like, it was, so I don't cry a lot at like shows and at like film and stuff. I find it really hard for like something. I can feel moved, but I just don't actually cry when watching things. It's a Sin, I'm not joking you. I was just sodden with tears from beginning to end. Like, and I think it is because of that reason, because like you can empathize in a way that I was watching that like, these are my people, and if I was born a couple decades earlier, this would be me here in London. Like, and there's just something about that that really strikes a nerve of like, you know, you just like, it's just stuff that you feel like you never think about enough. Like I should be constantly thinking about what happened to like my community years ago, and it was just amazing to see that just playing out on screen, and also just amazing to see how good of an actor Ollie Alexander is, because who knew? I didn't know.
You pulled that one out the back.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's been involved with like NYT, I believe, and he did a couple movies, but I don't know, people forget you know, after the whole years and years thing. So yeah, it was a lovely showcase for him. Awesome. Thank you very much, Kyran. And yes, Rory, I'd love to know the kind of stuff which you've seen, which has inspired you know, your creation.
Yeah. First of all, I just off what Kyran said, I just looking at you and being like, God, you need to apply to be the role of Ollie Alexander's younger brother at some point, because and just as soon as you said that, I was like, you look dead like him.
Thank you.
It's definitely a compliment. I'll this is a weird question for me, because I think a lot of the things I'm inspired by are not the things that I necessarily emulate. So like my biggest heroes and the people I'm most interested in are the people who do everything. So it's the Lin-Manuel Mirandas and the Tim Minchins and the Phoebe Waller-Bridges, like the people who, and the Michaela Coles, of course. Oh my God, like I think the fact that Michaela Cole created I May Destroy You, starred in it, produced it, directed it, wrote it, everything, that any part of it, she probably set designed it. Like she did everything because of this vision that she had that was so clear and so wonderful. And people like that. And Tim Minchin did this show called Upright. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And these people who have these kind of like all these different strings to their bow, and they never really decide to choose one. They just kind of go in with all their skills and say, oh yeah, I'll do the music to this, I'll produce this, I'll direct this. And I love that inspires me personally. I just really love that kind of thing. But then also like Russell T Davies is my favorite writer. There's
Zen fan, I presume.
Oh, a huge It's a Sin fan, massively. But I really like that show. There's some old shows that he's done. Like there's one called Bob and Rose that was only on for like one series, and it's from like 1999, and it's just it's just so amazing. And Cucumber and Banana, which was like 5 years ago, those shows, they're just masterpieces, like absolute masterpieces. And so I love that kind of thing. But the reason that I have kind of a bit weird with this question is because in terms of inspiration, I still think there's quite a lot of way to go, and I'm kind of trying to make myself the kind of person who challenges the problems in the theatre and TV industry. And what I mean by that is, especially with queer theatre and queer performances and queer TV and film, it's still a lot of beautiful young people dealing with sex or coming out or first times and stuff like that, which are all really important stories, and they're interesting and they're exciting, but they're also done. Like a lot of them are done. And so what I was trying to do with my first play was I was trying to look at a long-term relationship between two men in their 30s and just see what that was, because I hadn't seen that before. I've never seen a long-term relationship played out properly, and just have a look at how that is affected by being queer. Is it affected by being queer, or is it just like another long-term relationship? And those are questions I was asking myself. And my next play, the one that I'm writing now, is it's about fat phobia in the queer community. So it's going to be have 4 plus-size people in the leading roles. And I just feel like sometimes my inspiration comes from the fact that I'm not seeing bigger people on screen and stage. We're starting to see more trans representation, but it's still got a huge way to go. And so in terms of inspiration, I think what I tend to look for is what is not being said and what's not being put out there. And that kind of makes me go, cool, well, maybe I can add some stuff into this. Maybe I can put something here. I'm not trying to say that like I'm fixing theatre, guys. but like, I just don't want to be. I don't want to go and I want to go see a good queer theatre. I want to go and see it, but I don't really want to sit through 2 hours of 2 people with 6-packs talking about how hard it is to be, tall and beautiful. It's like, yeah, fine. I was like, but I've got a belly. I want to know what's that like. Going into a club and being a bit bigger. What's that experience? I was like, I know that experience, so I'm going to put it into the world. Yeah.
Awesome. And that actually segues into one of my questions really, really nicely, which is like, what pitfalls do you think queer theatre has encountered? What tropes can we let go? And you've articulated some of that beautifully. Yes. So I think there are some, you know, are we starting to tread ground which we've already seen before? You know, are we kind of getting stuck in like this ditch, metaphorical ditch of like, I don't know. I feel like perhaps we've seen a lot of coming out stories over the years. I feel like it would be so interesting to pick up from where, you know, this character has already came out, or like they don't need to like grapple with that journey of coming out, and more just like their experiences within like the queer community. I think that would be extremely interesting to from.
I think that the thing is, I think that sometimes I think those stories are still important, and I do think that they have relevance in our society as well, and they are helpful for people, because some people still have huge problems coming out, and we still have a lot of homophobia in the society, both internalized and external. But what I do think is that sometimes we're kind of missing the now of it, because with TV and film, you can kind of be forgiven for looking into the history. You kind of, it's honestly just what sells, really. But in theatre, I always feel like theatre does need to be about the now. And, you know, right now we've got, you know, conversion therapy is still going on, and the government keeps saying, yeah, we're going to fix it, we're going to fix it, we're going to fix it, and they don't. And it's like, okay, so where's the play about, you know, conversion therapy and all this kind of thing? I think sometimes we can, as artists, we can sometimes miss the what's going on right now around us, because I think, as well as queer people, we have a lot of it, like trauma that comes through just from being a queer person, and it's very easy to focus on that and to try and extrapolate it and use theatre as a therapy tool, which I think is great, because everyone should go to the theatre or do theatre as a sort of therapy tool. But I think also it's very useful to look at what's happening right now and what we could do to fix what's happening right now to people, you know, in our whole community.
For sure. And I'd like to invite Yulia and Kyran to have input on what do you think, like the pitfalls of theatre are potentially, or, you know.
So yeah, I think there's a period, and I don't know when it started, I don't know when it's going to end, when queer stories, like big queer stories, became sort of about making money and cashing in. Because I think that's the reason, like Rory said, about like things that sell. And I think the like beautiful, misunderstood, like twinkie guy who's like just masculine enough but just feminine enough for like the mainstream media to accept him. And we've seen that story of that person coming out and facing those troubles over and over and again. And I think that like the mainstream society, like of outside the community, have kind of lapsed that up and been like, yeah, we're accepting, we're allies, and they go and buy that stuff. So then they keep regurgitating that story when it's like it's been told over and over again. And I will die on this hill, Love, Simon's a bad film. But it's
I agree 100%. I remember seeing it and I was like, this does not live up to the hype whatsoever. I hated the film.
I was like,
Thank you.
Why is this being told now? Like, I was like, do you know what you could have done? What you could have done is had that story be a trans person and coming out and the struggles that are there, because that is a story that we haven't seen as much. That's a story that we need to see, because that's what we need to change society's perception on, because there's so much, like, with theatre, TV, film, with everything, I think these stories need to be replaced by trans people and trans people of color, because those are the stories that need to be told right now, that need the people that need to be uplifted. And the like gay white handsome male is like the most privileged out of anybody in the community, and to see that story just being told over and over again in so many different forms, because it's something that people know allies will enjoy, because it makes them feel good about being allies, is not good enough. Yeah, so I think a lot more, there needs to be a lot more focus on trans people and trans people of color in queer theatre.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was just gonna say that we've seen enough of the white twink man. Like
The white
we've seen enough. Just more stories of like even white able-bodied people. Like we've seen enough of those. We need people of color. We need trans people. We need to see people who are not as able-bodied as normal, like we might are.
For sure. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Like from like the promotion, like production sort of side as well. I feel like a trope, which I personally am very tired of, is like on a poster, it's like to promote a piece of queer work. Why do we need a topless chiseled white man in like some weird underwear? Like why do we need that to promote a show? Like I don't know.
Oh God, yes. Oh my God, sorry. Go on. Oh,
I just feel like
yes.
it really puts, I don't know, the queer community in this sort of like bubble. Like this is what they want. This is like exactly, I don't know how to sell it. It's, I don't know. Do you guys know what I mean? Like I'm hoping to open up some discussion about that.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I completely agree with that. I think I've walked past enough of those posters, and they're all in neon, and they're all in black backgrounds, and it's all like, God, you could grate cheese on the abs. It's like, it's great, it's lovely, fine, but I don't see any difference to this between any other poster. And I think, again, like we've been saying, this does come down to money and what is going to sell, and obviously, a sexuality of that ilk is the sort of mainstream, and that's the thing that's going to sell. But what I tend to find with those plays as well is that what they're actually selling is on the poster, it's selling sex with the nudity, and then you go into the play and it's normally about trauma, or it's about like misery. It comes to some sort of miserable end normally. Because it's, if you've got nudity on the poster, you're going to assume you're going to be seeing something sort of slightly darker or gritty or whatever. And I think with that, it comes into like a little problem of like, when are we ever going to tell the proper rom-com? When are we going to tell like the Bridesmaids but full of queer people? Like all these, like, where's the fun stories about this? Like the proper comedies about like real people. I just think that we sometimes linger in the trauma, and audiences really seem to lap that up. And sometimes I'm like, I want to see one that works out. I want to have a nice kiss at the end, and then everyone goes home feeling warm and fuzzy. I think there's room for that.
For sure. And coming off like trauma, like what a lovely word. That was strange. Thank you. But coming off trauma, in terms of like creating work, yes. What am I trying to articulate here? Creating work. How do you stay protected when we use our own experiences in our work, or even when performing in like a piece of work? How does someone have like that mental hygiene to protect themselves? And I don't know whether like Yulia, you've had any experiences of this, like even when just like performing in drag. Like do you ever sort of put any of your own experience into your own drag, or do you feel like drag is your distancing yourself from that, like, and it becomes an art of celebration and joy?
Yeah, that's more like I have done one more serious piece, and I literally left the stage crying, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. It was a good experience, not saying that, but it's just I prefer doing pieces that are more celebratory and like just being fun, because like I feel like we see enough of those traumatic, sad stories, and I just want to bring something else.
For sure. And say if you were to approach that performance, which ended in a sad sort of way, like how do you think you would go about that differently? Or
I don't know, because I'm just not used to. I felt like I was being so vulnerable on stage, and I feel like I use humor a lot in my performances to kind of combat that. So I mean, I would perform it again, but in just like environments that I know are safe, like at our own club, for instance, because I know it's a safe environment for me. But yeah, I don't know.
I'm curious as well, like where does your like performance side come from? Like, have you had experience in theatre and like acting before, or is this?
I actually did go to like a theater oriented high school in Finland, but I've never like done much acting or anything. I'm more like visual arts person myself. But I don't really know where it comes from. I just I don't really know.
You just find that you just like pop on stage, like it
Yeah,
all comes alive.
yeah, and then sometimes I just find like songs that really speak to me, and like that's like for instance, that performance that was like more vulnerable, it was a song by Ali X, and it's just like this very emotional song, and I really felt like it spoke through me, and so that's how it really just depends, but usually it starts with the song, like I let that speak for me.
Something which I absolutely love about like Lady Gaga as well, particularly in the masterpiece which is Chromatica. Let's have a moment to appreciate Chromatica.
Yeah.
It's like it's putting it was her channeling like her pain in like a positive sort of way, like reclaiming dance for like huge respect for that. Like she's taken some big old struggles in her life, and she's turned them into absolute pop bangers.
And I love that. Like I'm all for like a sad ballad, like lip syncing, being dramatic, but I just love, like I did a digital drag performance to 911, and I just like, it was literally me popping like my anxiety pills. And I just thought it was like the perfect way of like just being fun, but also still like talking about like, obviously I very much relate to that song with like my anxiety things. So
for sure. And yeah, how have you found, like you mentioned you did the online show, like how has everything been in terms of like the pandemic? Like where has drag and cabaret and club, like how has that managed to survive in this?
we did a series of online drag shows under the Happy Hour brand, but it just kind of, it's not the same, and I think we had 3 in total, and then we just like decided that this is not it. This is like digital drag is not for us. And then that 911 performance I did for another digital drag thing that I was asked to perform in. But I feel like I just don't, me personally, I just don't feel like I have the energy to look at a drag show online, because it's not the same, and I miss the being in a club and like being in that lovely environment of gay queer energy, and it just doesn't, to me it doesn't translate on Twitch or Instagram live or something.
For sure. I'm sure that the same could be said for theatre as well. Like I have a huge pining for that traditional theatre experience, sitting in a theatre. I miss it so much.
Yeah.
But I'd love to open up the conversation, because I know that both Kyran and Rory, you both are from contemporary theatre East 15, create your own work. Like how do you stay protected when creating your own stuff? Like, do you have any top tips for people who may be listening?
It's a weird one, because even like just being at drama school in general, you're kind of, I mean, dependent on the drama school, but you're kind of told, hey, if you went through this as a child, maybe you should use this for your breakup scene here. And I'm really sorry, I'm literally plugging in my laptop because I just got a message that it's about to die. Got it. Right. Okay. Yeah. You're kind of told like, use all of this trauma that you experienced as a child for like this big emotional scene. And it's a weird one, because then on top of that, you're using all of your own experiences all the time anyway, especially for creating your own work. And it's kind of a difficult one to try and give advice for. You just kind of have to try and figure out your own way of doing it, as healthy as possible, and like what kind of things to stay away from and what kind of things you're okay with doing. It's just kind of having a conversation with yourself, I think. And for me, it's only using the stuff that like I've come to terms with and that I've really thought through in my life, and like I know why this happened and how it made me how I am and how I can use this in a healthy way, you know what I mean? Whereas I think a lot of people are very quick to use an experience that has happened to them quite recently, and they haven't had time to process it, and they haven't had time to really think about the ins and outs of it, and then they use it and it's really unhealthy and it damages them. So for me, I think, yeah, it's a case of time and a case of having a discussion with yourself or a therapist or anybody to really talk about what this event was. And then when you understand it properly, I think you're way more likely to be able to use it in your art in a safe way without damaging your mental health.
Thank you. I'm getting good tips.
Rory,
Yeah.
any tips to impart?
I mean, I know I get that same thing. I agree. In drama school, it is like, oh God, you need to just pull this out of the darkness from your soul within and put it all out on stage for everyone to see, and that's fine. Like if you've got the what's the word? If you've kind of had that time to process it and you're okay with it and you're okay with putting yourself out there, which a lot of performers are, because that's kind of our drive, is to put what's on the inside on the outside. And as long as you've had time to process that and you feel comfortable doing that, then I'd say go for it. But I agree with Kyran. It is like you need to have processed it for yourself before you start giving it to somebody else, because otherwise you're just sharing stuff out and not really giving yourself the time to process it and accept it and come to terms with it in your own way. So for me, I mean, I'd say more in terms of like as a writer than a performer. For me, if I'm putting on my own experiences or my own feelings and thoughts into a piece of work as a writer, what I'll normally try and do is I'll try and look at sort of the other side of whatever I'm saying. So if I'm talking about some sort of something that I believe in or something that I feel very strongly about, I try very hard to then go and look at the other side. I always do it like, try and imagine you're on the other side of the Twitter algorithm, you know, all the things that you don't see, like try and put yourself there and see what it's like. Because then even if something you completely disagree with, you at least know what the other thought process is, and you can build a solid like understanding of what you're talking about and how you feel as well. And I'm not saying you have to go and agree with all the alt-right trolls, like don't get sucked into like a minefield of that. But I think in terms of taking care of yourself, I think the one thing that I advocate, aside from going to therapy, which is obviously the ideal, but not everyone can afford it, and you know it's impossible to get on waiting lists at the moment. But aside from therapy, is just understanding you and yourself and your feelings as best as you can, and getting as much information as you can about what you're saying, and then hopefully you can analyze in your own body, in your own head, in your own minds, and you know find comfort in wherever you live. I went really sort of philosophical near the end. Wasn't intending to go that way.
Loving it though, loving the philosophical vibes. I think, yeah, I'm going to draw on a reference from RuPaul's Drag Race All Stars 5, when Shea Coulee was talking about her experience with like the Rose Petals. I don't know if y'all have y'all seen the show? Cool. But like I remember she was really struggling with like processing that, and then getting to like the stand-up comedy challenge, where it was like, you know, if you're ready to laugh at it, then go for it. Like, you know, this was something which, you know, really affected her for a long time, and then she found, you know, if she's able to make light of it and, you know, turn it into something which, you know, can entertain and like entertain others, then that's a good way of potentially going about something which is difficult otherwise to talk about. Like if you can make fun of it, then you know you're one step further to processing and getting past that hurdle. but yes, thank you guys so much for chatting about that. I think particularly as, you know, queer creatives as well, like there's some of more difficult things have happened in our lives, which, you know, the straights could never. And yeah, I think it's, in especially our line of work, it's really important to be able to tell those stories, but also do that in a way which is healthy and safe. So yeah, thanks guys. A question which I'm super interested to get your thoughts on this. How do we feel about heterosexual / cisgender people taking on queer roles in theatre, like theatre specifically? Because I've been thinking about this, and I'm like, obviously there is a standard within film, like, you know, there's been all sorts of like conversations where people have been like queer roles for queer people, and absolutely I 100% agree with that. But I'm like, I think back to like Andrew Garfield in Angels in America, and I think he was celebrated for that role. He got a Tony. Like, I'm thinking like, where was everyone's criticism when that occurred? Like, when we think, instead comparing to like where James Corden absolutely took the piss in The Prom. Like, is there a difference in standards to theatre and film in terms of queer roles for queer people? I don't know. I'm super interested to get your thoughts.
It's such a weird, like, it's such a big conversation, and it's so difficult to try and like understand. But for me, like, so firstly with the cisgender thing, I don't think it's ever appropriate for a cisgendered person to be playing somebody who is trans, because dysphoria is such a specific thing, and also because trans people at the current climate are just not given any other roles than trans roles, which is something that needs to change. But having cisgender people playing trans roles when trans people are only seen for trans roles because of the way the industry is at the moment is just not acceptable. So I don't think that's ever okay. But with playing a different sexuality, I think it's kind of a different ball game, because for me anyway, sexuality, I mean, as gender is, but sexuality is so fluid, and people are constantly having conversations in their brain about like where they are and stuff. And I think it's much easier to access as an actor than it would be to play a trans role, because I just don't think you have the experience, lived experience or knowledge to play a trans role. But with playing a different sexuality, I think for most people it's probably easier to access, because it's attraction and love which you have experienced, which you can just put into a different place, whereas people that are cisgender haven't experienced dysphoria. But that being said, the same thing counts for queer actors only being seen for queer roles. And if you look like myself and you're quite like androgynous and stuff, and you're kind of put into this box of like, this is your casting, so you need to always play a queer role, but then somebody like Darren Criss then playing that queer role when they're straight and then getting awards for it is kind of like, that would be more okay if somebody like me was seen for the straight roles as well. You know what I mean? It should be an even playing field for sexuality. If straight people are wanting to play queer roles also, then get the queer actors in the same rooms as those straight people. You know what I mean? Big conversation.
Big conversation. And it's interesting as well, to come back to Andrew Garfield. Tony Kushner asked Andrew Garfield to take on that role, which I think is the most interesting part. Like, a queer writer with one of the most prolific queer plays in modern history asks a straight man to take on the very challenging lead. And that's a wild thing to comprehend to me. And like Rory as well, like in your work, like would you ever do a Tony Kushner? Like, would you ever allow a non-queer actor to take on a queer role, or is that like a big no-no?
Yeah, it's a huge question. Look, this is what we do whenever we do a casting call for Paper Mug, especially when we're doing queer theatre, is that it always put at the bottom, we would especially like to hear from LGBT individuals. And that's because normally when we're doing this kind of thing, people don't have to go and, if you bring in a straight actor, they will normally have to go and research these experiences. And normally how you research is by talking to other people and reading and going online. And then you get all that stuff from external sources. Whereas when you're working with LGBT actors, it's fairly inherent. Like the research side of it doesn't need to be as extensive, and also doesn't need to be as third party. They have first-hand experience and can channel their own experiences into the performance, which I always really love. What I do think about this is that I'm not against having a straight actor in a queer role, but I do think that it shouldn't be these sort of like quite specific subsections. So in the example of Andrew Garfield, he's extremely feminine and flamboyant in that performance, and Andrew Garfield isn't particularly known for that, but there are thousands of very feminine, very flamboyant actors. So I don't know if the flamboyant is the right word to use there, but very feminine actors who would not have been seen for that role. I mean, the one that comes to my mind at the top of my head is Jim Parsons, who has had some fantastic success recently, and I really love that he really embraces this kind of this feminine energy, and that's kind of coming through a lot. What I think, it's a bit of a ramble, but essentially what I tend to find, and this is sort of comes from my drama school experience, what I tend to see is in training, a lot of the straight actors or the people who identify as straight, when they would perform queer roles and they'd camp it up in inverted commas, would be very like praised and like, wow, well done for stepping out of your comfort zone, well done for doing that. When the feminine actors, when the queer actors come in, and they are made for a good portion of those 3 years to try and be as masculine as possible, to fit these like roles and to try and fit into these boxes that isn't their casting. And it drove me at the wall, because I was like, why are you forcing these people to try and be like trying to fit into this sort of straight mold so that they can play everything? Because the thing is that not everyone can play everything, like, and you should be free. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, that's all right. I've coming off your like being made to fit a mold, like I've experienced a bit of that, and I found it's often done in like subtle sort of ways. Like it's not like be more masculine, but it's like find your grounded energy. You know what I mean? Like they
do, yeah.
Soft sort of terms, which means like, you know, find that masculine energy, but they use it in an artistic sort of term, you know.
And I know where they're coming from, because obviously they're trying to make sure that you can get as many roles as you possibly can, and they're trying to make every actor into a chameleon and who can do everything. But in doing that, there's this risk that you just erase all this like this beautiful soft feminine energy in actors. I'm sorry, actually, I'm speaking specifically from a male perspective. From a female perspective as well, you also have people who are a lot more masculine. You know, these masculine and feminine energies. And I find that, you know, they're trying to get people to be as castable as possible, and in doing so, there's a big risk of just trying to erase what makes them great, what makes them a fantastic actor and a fantastic person and creative, and in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of get the rub about that in terms of putting straight actors. I think the problem I have with it is that if you put a straight actor in a queer role, then it's like they're more likely to get lauded and praised than the other way around. And it just shouldn't be a thing.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Definitely seen that before. And Yulia, like, do you have any more thoughts? Like,
no, really, you guys have really like put it together very well. I don't think I have anything to add.
No worries. We are coming up to our hour sort of time, and I'd just like to ask one more final question, specifically to Kyran and Yulia. yeah, what excites you? Like what has drawn you from, like you both had like experience in theatre and performance, like what excites you about the club compared to the theatre? I'd love to know. Like,
You can go first if you want to.
Okay. Yeah. So with a club, it's just, I don't know, there's something so freeing about just putting on whatever you want to put on and like creating this whole fantasy. And then like, it feels like you're just being your truest self and having fun, and there's no like stress or barriers. And, it's just like a really big family when you're out with your drag family, or you're out with your queer friends. And then performing in a club it's so crazy, because like being like doing theater is amazing, and it gives you such a feeling that like you can't get anywhere else. But then doing a drag performance in a club gives you a completely different feeling, even though they're kind of on the same side of the coin. Like, it's just the reactions for me. Like in theater, it's like, woo, okay, at the end, and then like, that's it. That's how you do it in theater. And then like in a performance in a club, you are made to feel like you are the biggest like celebrity in the entire world. Like, you are showered with love. People are so impressed at every single thing you do, and it's like the reactions are like so crazy over the top. People are screaming and shouting like for literally everything throughout the whole performance. And then like it just feels so validating. It's like, whoa, my god. So it's a completely different type of happiness, because you feel so like, with theater it's like, get through this entire journey and you're following all of this through, and then like you're commended at the end and you feel like, okay, job done. But then like in a gay bar, you're like, okay, I am just the Lady Gaga throughout the moment I walk through the door to the moment I leave, and people are obsessed. And it just feels so much like, it's kind of less professional, which is nice, because it's like the two areas, it's the same thing but different shades.
Sure. And I bet it's like playing like a home crowd every single night, like playing people who just to a group of exclusively like queer people, and just sharing that joy, which I'm sure Yulia can relate to as well, like everything.
I agree completely with what you're saying. I love performing in these, like, a lot of the venues that I've performed in are more like these like literal club basements with like, I can literally touch the ceiling. It's that tiny basement club stage, which like I love, because the spaces are like so tiny and the energy is like just packed in there. And then you literally feel like the queen of the world when you do the smallest little things and like everyone's screaming. One time I I do not know how to death drop, not at all, but I had this performance where this number where I death drop or kind of fall in the similar manner. And it's just the audience goes crazy every time I do it, and it's like I'm not even like I'm literally just like falling, and it's fucking funny. But yeah, it's just like the energy is so different. I feel like because it's so intense and everyone's just like packed there, because I've also done performances in like more like traditional theater type of venues, and that just kind of feels kind of too stale or like too like sterile, in a way. I feel I love the sort of intense club feeling, sweating in a basement and somewhere in Helsinki. I love that. What was I gonna say? I think that's it.
That's a sensation which I miss.
Oh, and also just like the fact that I think doing drag clubs, I know I'm performing for a mostly queer audience, and that makes me just like feel more safe. I've also done like performances for like in like schools and like for like some sort of parties for where I know the audience isn't mostly queer people, and it's just a very different vibe, I feel like.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really hope that we're able to, experience some wonderful club performances again at some point soon. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I feel like that's such a lovely note to end on as well, like queer joy. Yee!
Yeah.
Yes, I would just like to say thank you very, very much, you guys, for chatting with me for this hour. And yes, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Spill the Tea.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Look out for a summary pack that will be up on our Instagram, and continue these conversations into your own lives. Make sure to follow us on our socials to find out what else we have been up to, and do look out for our other episodes.